Alright, y'all. Well, I'm back here, and welcome back to my channel. And I just want to start off by saying, y'all, that I know a lot of people do not believe in God, but I am one to believe in God, and I am one to encourage you to believe in God. He built this entire world, and He gave you life. And if you feel that is too much, you can go ahead. But if you feel the urge to sit down and listen, I want to share something with y'all. We are all living in this world with rules, no matter how we look at it. You have to understand structure brings rules. Rather, if you own a business, you manage a company, you work for a company, your wife, your mother, your father, you are a husband, you are aunt, your brother, your sister, your cousin, whatever you are, whatever those titles are, you know that you have rules that follow. I know that you have to say yes to that because there are rules in place. And a lot of y'all have this misconception of the Bible that it's just a book of rules, and it's really not when you really look at what God is trying to show us in this word. And it starts from the beginning all the way to the end. But right now I want to focus on the beginning of the Bible, and that's Genesis. I want y'all to go into that book because it shows you the history of free will and law. And God, law is good. It is so good for us. If you look at the story of Adam and Eve, you will see how God deal with us and how He created this world. In Genesis 1, it shows you about Him creating this world. In Genesis 2, it talks about man, how He placed man into this garden, and whatever name man set out his mouth, rather it was the fowls of the air, the birds in the air, rather He said this is a raven's bird, whatever it is, man had the power to do that. God saw that man needed a helpmate, which is why woman was made from man. A lot of people do not want to believe that theory, and that's okay. But if you could just focus on Genesis 2, I believe verse 25, and it talks about, God talks about that they were naked in this garden that He placed them in, and He told them not to eat from this tree. They were naked and they were not ashamed. Genesis 2 verse 25 says, I believe it's 25, y'all can go fact check me, but I believe it is. And it talks about how they were naked, and how that they were not ashamed that they were naked, because they were not lusting for one another at this time. And God told them not to eat from this one specific tree, which is where the first rule come in for man. You can name whatever you want this to be, whatever you choose this mic to be. You can name whatever you want this mic to be, whatever you want to identify this shirt as, you can name it as, okay? Because you have that power to do that. And then God told them that there was one rule. There was one rule. Just don't eat from that tree. Now, if we come to society today, or the rules of today, and you are a parent or anything of an adult, and you see a child putting their hand up to the stove that it's on, you're going to tell them, hey, don't touch that stove, it's hot. And they're going to touch it because you just told them it's hot, but they never touched it before, so it's hot, so let me touch it. Okay, but back to Adam and Eve in this garden. God, they didn't know that they were, well, they knew they were naked. They just wasn't lustful towards one another, or they weren't ashamed of their bodies towards one another, because they didn't see each other as a figure to lust after, to be like, oh my God, like, ooh, like she got a fat, none of that. And then comes in chapter 3 of Genesis, comes along a serpent that says, hey, why we can't eat from this tree again? And then Eve she goes on to tell this serpent, you can't eat from this tree. God said because you will die. That's what she basically says to the serpent. And the serpent, in the most deceiving way, tells her the truth. He told them that God didn't want them to be like him. And when I say them, I just want y'all to pause for a minute, because I want y'all to understand in chapter 3 of Genesis, you have to take an account and you have to ask these questions. I had to ask these questions, and it was, who is God before and after they eat from the tree of knowledge? He's all knowing, correct? Before and after they eat from the tree, he's all knowing. Now back to the Garden of Eden, okay? When the serpent told Adam and Eve, and the reason why I say Adam and Eve, because he was there the entire time. You can fact check me. Adam was there the entire time. She handed him the fruit. She didn't wander off anything. She handed him the fruit. When the serpent told Adam and Eve God didn't want them to eat from the tree because they would be like God, they were curious to know, because it was something new. Like the kid that you tell not to touch that stove because it's hot and it's new to them. The serpent told them that they would not die but surely live, which was the truth but a lie in a sense. Before, their flesh was good. Their flesh, the inward man, the outward man was good. It was good according to living to God's rules and do not touch that tree. They were living good. Ask this, how could it be the truth and a lie? And I'm finna get there. Or they wouldn't physically die, or they would basically spiritually die, because they could no longer see God because he was too pure. Like his light was too shining. Like, you know how you can't look into the sun correctly because it's too bright? He was so, like, they were pure at one point. And because that one disrespectful, that one thing that you did not follow because you wanted to be, you cannot, like, your child hand of them touching that stove won't be pure again because they have burned their hand, right? Or it'll be a little, you know, a little thing, and it just burns. You may not see it. It's just damage, okay? So they were spiritually dead. I believe that they spiritually died. And they didn't physically die. They were able to still live because God took them out of this garden. Because at this point, you know, they saw each other naked after they ate from the tree. Their eyes was open, and they were made like God, knowing of good and evil. So they saw what evil could do, and evil was ashamed to see each other in that way of lusting for each other. Okay, just like we do when we sin, or we're in that separation from God. And based on that, it was their free will to choose that. And you could say, well, then if God is all knowing, right, before and after, why he didn't intervene? Because it takes away our choice to choose. It takes away our free will. God gives us free will to choose right. He gives us a choice, right? And he says, listen, don't touch that or don't do that. And we go ahead and we dabble with it. And instead of us going straight, we end up taking all these detours around to get to the point of learning something. And that was Adam and Eve in this case, because they were no longer in the garden. They could no longer see God because they were speaking to God. They were face to face with God. They could see him and speak with him. And after they noticed each other naked bodies, because their eyes was open, and felt the shame, kind of like, you know, how we do, you know, when we first have sex, you know, you feel a little shame, you don't want to show your little body off there, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to see. But then, you know, it may be different from other people, but I know it was not different from me. But the rule was not to eat from the tree, that one specific tree, and they had the will to either follow that rule or disobey that rule. And like I was saying, if God would have intervened, there would be no free will for them to choose or to even experience that. God will have to just stop them without giving them the chance to choose and learn from the choice. But when God showed up, Adam and Eve ran from him because they knew they were ashamed of how they felt when their eyes were open, and they became like gods, knowing of good and evil. And that's how some people portray themselves today. They portray themselves as gods. You can, a lot of things, and it strips the power from God. And I don't want to ever strip my power from God, because He is the leader in my life, regardless of some of my choices. But it's my free will, and hopefully we can come together and we all can see that. But there is an agenda against humanity.